State Question 780 and 781, Justice Reform. State Question 780 reduces all simple drug possession and property crimes under 1,000 to misdemeanors from felonies. State Question 781 uses savings from State Question 780 to fund rehabilitation services like drug rehab and alternative sentencing. 781 can only go into effect if 780 passes. Supporters say Oklahoma has the highest incarceration rate in the country, creating huge costs for housing nonviolent criminals. Felonies for simple drug possession and property crimes have contributed to the workforce shortage, negatively impacting economic growth and burdening taxpayers. State Question 780 will save the state a lot of money, so it makes sense to invest some of those savings into better treatment and rehabilitation programs in State Question 781. What do opponents say? To reduce prison overcrowding, we should reduce the sentences for nonviolent crimes. However, these crimes should still remain felonies so that potential employers are aware of criminal behavior. State Question 781 creates a financial obligation for the state based on certain, very uncertain, arbitrary, and subjective calculations. Questions on State Question 780 or 781? Yes, ma'am.
Do we still have private prisons?
We do. Now, the federal government is moving away from private prisons, but the state of Oklahoma still does have private prisons and still actively pursues those prisons.
So this is what I find weird. Private prisons, you're going to need to have criminals to go in there. So, get the laws so the criminals go in there and fill up the private prisons. So, it'd be good to get rid of those.
Mm-hmm. I think that private prisons are an essential part of Oklahoma's strategy to those that are in the system, because right now in our DOC system we're extremely full. It also that reality also affects counties. And I heard on a daily basis how that affected Garfield County, which I used to represent, and they were basically 90% full as well, and most of those were DOC inmates. Just to kind of give you a sense, and I talked a little bit about the high incarceration rate. We in Oklahoma rank first in incarceration in women, and we rank fourth in incarceration of men. But that being said, the opponents will say that at the end of the day, the reducing from the $1,000 threshold in terms of property, or increasing to $1,000 in terms of property, will affect how employers are aware of how their employees are moving forward in terms of any kind of drug paraphernalia or drug problem that they might have. Misdemeanors do not show up on a background check. Yes, ma'am.
Possession based on the fact that it's under $1,000 worth or whatever it is, or
Yes.
or what is that?
Yes, and that can be different for each drug. For example, methamphetamine might, and there is already I believe a scale that is used by the district attorneys, and each drug will be different in terms of the actual amount needed to eclipse the 1,000. Do what?
A simple drug is based on the amount of money and not the drug itself. A simple drug possession isn't based on maybe marijuana against cocaine or something like that. It's the money it's the money is what determines that?
It's the amount of money that drug is currently worth.
Okay.
So the second part of that says the money, the funds would go to rehabilitation services, drug rehab, alternative sentencing. Would it go to places that are already here, facilities that are already doing those kind of things? Because I think they're very underfunded. Or are they going to create new things?
I think, and I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that in its entirety, but my guess would be if 780 and 781 both do pass, that it would probably fund those programs that are already in place, as well as look at funding programs that are currently not available.
So one can be passed and the other not. So what happens?
Correct. Well, if 780 passes, then the program goes into place. But what 781 does, and that was the second argument opposed, which 781 creates a financial obligation. What 781 basically states is that OMES would basically be allowed to certify a number in terms of the money saved based on the less incarceration of criminals. And then that number would basically go towards this effort. And there's no real spelling out of how they would actually come up with the amount used to fund the program. Yes, sir.
A moment ago, you said that misdemeanors don't appear on background checks. Will you please elaborate on which background checks those don't?
Well,
Because I know
usually,
several
right,
that do.
right. It depends, but usually the ones if an employer actually does do a background check or looks at some of the things there, most misdemeanors, which can be a traffic ticket or those types of things, don't. Where felonies do show up pretty quickly unless they've been completely expunged. And I think that that's one of the main opponents to this is not that they don't believe that it's needed, that maybe an alteration to the way it was written is needed to ensure that people that do eclipse that property threshold, at least letting the employer know that that is a common occurrence.
Okay. I worked for the courts for 16 years.
Sure.
I respectfully disagree with you on the
Okay.
background check.
Okay.
Mike, you had mentioned the high level of incarceration
Sure.
In our state, and especially females, but across the board. Do you have any idea of where the state sets in any kind of a rating among other states in the financial obligation for mental health and substance abuse that
It's a great
781
question, and I don't know
addresses?
how we rank there in terms of comparative to other states, but I will find out in terms of how we rate. I do know that since 2010, we've seen a tremendous increase in the funding. That is one of Governor Fallon's main pushes is to increase the funding towards mental health, specifically those that are incarcerated and part of the mental health system, because the supporters of State Question 780 have continually said that many of these instances where they are incarcerated could be forms of mental health rather than quote-unquote criminal behavior.